You stand at a funeral. You wear black. You bring flowers. You lower your voice without thinking about it. Nobody taught you these rules in a classroom. You just knew. But the real answer to why you do this is far stranger than tradition. It reaches back further than language, further than agriculture, further than the wheel. It reaches back to a cave in the mountains of northern Iraq, 60,000 years ago, where something happened that changed what it meant to be human. Your instinct to mark death did not begin with religion. It did not begin with civilization. It began in the dark, with a body and a choice. In 1957, an archaeologist named Ralph Selecki was excavating Shanidar Cave when his team uncovered the remains of a Neanderthal man. Around and beneath the skeleton, soil samples revealed high concentrations of pollen. Selecki proposed something radical for the time. He suggested the body had been laid on a bed of flowers. Cornflowers, yarrow, hollyhock, a funeral bouquet, older than the pyramids by tens of thousands of years. The idea stunned the world. A Neanderthal, a species long caricatured as brutish and unfeeling, appeared to have grieved, appeared to have cared. Later, researchers questioned the pollen data, suggesting burrowing rodents may have dragged the flowers in long after burial. The debate is still not fully settled, but here is what nobody disputes. The body was placed deliberately, curled on its side, positioned with intention. Someone, or some group, decided that this person could not simply be left where they fell. Move forward tens of thousands of years to a site called Sungir in modern-day Russia. Around 34,000 years ago, two children were buried head-to-head in a single grave, their bodies covered in an almost unimaginable number of ivory beads, more than 10,000 of them, each one carved by hand from mammoth tusk. Archaeologists estimate that carving that many beads using Stone Age tools would have taken thousands of hours of collective labor. Think about that. An entire community spending months, maybe years, decorating two children who could give nothing back. That is not survival behavior. Survival does not ask you to spend a winter's worth of labor on the dead. Something else was happening. Status, perhaps. Love, almost certainly. A community announcing, in the only language available to them, that these two lives had mattered. The archaeologist Paul Pettit, who has spent much of his career studying the origins of human burial, argues that these acts were never simple. He suggests early burial practices reflect a dawning awareness among early humans that death was not just something that happened to others. It was something coming for everyone. Burying the dead with care may have been an early form of psychological defense, a way of imposing order on the one fact no mind can fully digest. Here is the strange part. You still do this. You still impose order on the unbearable. You choose a coffin. You choose music. You choose exactly which flowers, decades after Shanidar, without ever knowing why flowers became the default at all. You write a eulogy that turns a chaotic, aching loss into a structured narrative with a beginning, a middle, and a lesson. This is not weakness. This is the oldest coping mechanism your species ever built. Ritual does not erase grief. It gives grief a shape you can carry. For a long time, psychologists believed grief itself followed a fixed shape. 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Neat, orderly, almost comforting in its structure. But the researcher George Bonanno, a clinical psychologist at Columbia University who has spent decades studying bereavement, found something the stage model never predicted. Most people do not move through grief in a tidy sequence at all. Does that surprise you? It surprised the field of psychology too. For decades, people who did not progress through the stages correctly were sometimes seen as grieving wrong. Bonanno's work suggested the opposite. There was never one correct way. There were only the ancient, improvised tools your species has always reached for. Community, ritual, objects placed with care, a body positioned gently instead of left where it fell. Even the color you wear might trace back further than you think. Black mourning clothing became formalized in parts of Europe centuries ago, but the underlying instinct to visibly separate the grieving from the world around them echoes something much older. Anthropologists studying grief across cultures have repeatedly found the same underlying pattern, even when the specific customs differ wildly. A visible marker, a pause in normal life, a signal to the group that says something has been lost here, treat this person gently. You might think this is about the dead. It was never only about the dead. The anthropologist Barbara King, who has studied grief responses across humans and other animals, points out something unsettling and beautiful at the same time. Elephants have been observed lingering near the bones of dead herd members, touching them gently with their trunks. Chimpanzees have been seen carrying deceased infants for days, but no other species builds beads by the thousands. No other species writes eulogies, plants gardens over graves, or returns years later to leave flowers at a stone with a name carved into it. Grief may not be uniquely human. Ritual almost certainly is. That is the twist buried underneath all of this. You did not inherit funerals because death is sad. Every social animal understands loss on some level. You inherited funerals because your ancestors discovered something more specific. Ritual helps the living keep functioning. It is not primarily a gift to the dead. It is scaffolding for the people who have to wake up the next morning and somehow keep going. Think about the last funeral you attended, the forced schedule of it, the specific tasks, choosing a casket, writing a program, calling relatives, standing in a receiving line and shaking hands with strangers. None of that comforts the person who died. All of it exists to give the grieving mind something to hold on to besides the unbearable size of the loss itself. There is something almost comforting in that continuity. You are not inventing a response to death from scratch, alone, in your grief. You are performing an act that stretches back through every generation of humans who ever loved someone and then had to watch them go. The beads at Sangir, the pollen at Shanidar, disputed or not. The eulogy you write with shaking hands, all branches of the same root. So the next time you find yourself lowering your voice in a funeral home or choosing flowers without quite knowing why, remember what you are actually doing. You are not following an arbitrary social script. You are participating in one of the oldest continuous behaviors your species has ever practiced. A behavior so old it predates your own species entirely. A behavior that once turned a cave floor into something almost like a shrine, tens of thousands of years before anyone had a word for grief at all. You stand at a funeral. You wear black. You bring flowers. And for the first time, you understand exactly why.